Hello Facebook Funsters, it's Steve Barrett here from PRWeek, ready to record our weekly podcast. Hello to you on Facebook Live. Hope you're enjoying the day. Please enjoy the show. Hope the sound is good for you, and if you've got any comments or questions or praise that you want to give us, please append to the podcast. If you want to criticize us, well, if you have to, but I'd rather, constructive criticism, always welcome. So, we've got a great guest this week. We've got Rashada Whitehead from KGBerry. Hey, Rashada.
How are you?
So we're going to kick off the show momentarily. And our Frank Washkuch, of course.
Of course.
Back from yet another holiday, Frank.
Yeah, you almost forgot about me.
I mean, when's your next vacation?
Thanksgiving.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Tomorrow.
Well, Columbus Day.
Long weekend.
Columbus Day.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to go. Hello and welcome to the PRWeek, PRWeek's regular weekly roundup of everything that matters in the worlds of PR and communications. My name's Steve Barrett. I'm the editor-in-chief of PRWeek and I guide you through the next 25, maybe 30 minutes as we pick up on the big topics of the week. Another busy week in communications and marketing and in the world generally. We have a fantastic guest for you this week. It's Rashada Whitehead, who is president of KGBerry. Rashada, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm great.
All the way in from
you?
Chicago.
Chi-town.
Yeah, absolutely. Always good to get a flavour of Chicago on the show. So we're looking forward to hearing from Rashada about her work and her career in various PR firms in Chicago area. So, and we've got Frank Washkuch here, fresh from another vacation.
That's
He's
right.
rocking that beard again, listeners.
But not the tan this time.
Well, I think you've still got the
Maybe a
tan
little
from
bit.
before, actually.
Yeah, well.
But this is probably not much use to podcast listeners, but we are live on Facebook, so this is for their benefit. How you doing, Frank?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Yeah, pretty good. You know, I'm off on holiday next week, so
Yeah.
looking forward to that.
And where are you going?
I'm going to Turkey.
Right.
I'm going to play chess in the European Championships, Frank. Try and avoid being beaten by 9-year-olds, which is what happened to me in a tournament a couple of months ago.
Is this a true story?
It is a true story. A chastening experience that was.
A 9-year-old human being or a robot?
It wasn't a robot, but that's a good segue into
right.
one of our first topics. You've done this before, my friend. Yeah, we're going to talk about AI. That's the big feature. Sorry about that gap in service. Picking up a copy of a print magazine with a cover for our Facebook Live listeners or viewers or consumers, whatever you want to call yourselves. There it is. Great cover, isn't it? Yeah, you want to check that out. A lot of good content in there. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about a bunch of people moves from this week, including Jonathan Mildenhall leaving Airbnb to start up his own practice. We'll talk about that Army contract and McCann's. And we'll talk about diversity in marketing and communications. And Dannon has dropped Cam Newton after that sexist comment at the press conference. So, he lost out on an endorsement there. But let's start with you, Rashada. Tell us about KGBerry. Firstly, where does the name come from? What does that mean?
So I am an evolutionary, right? So I would say that not just in career, but in life, I'm all about evolving. And I think the principle behind that is giving and getting. So KGBerry is keep getting, keep giving, keep growing fruit. And that's the backstory.
I get it. Okay, and I didn't know that, you see.
Yes.
So listeners, you got an exclusive there. And you set up your own shop back in 2014.
Yes,
You'd been at Flowers Communications before that. You'd been at Golin. So what was the impetus between sort of going out on your own, and what sort of clients are you working with?
So it's interesting. Impetus is really that internal, like I'm an entrepreneur at heart and I come from a family of entrepreneurs and I've kind of known that. And so PR is a great industry to be in. And when my career had gotten to a certain point and I had a breadth and depth of experience, and then I went on maternity leave.
Right.
And there's no better break. So let's get to the practical side. There's no better break of a life reset than it's like, okay, now is the time. And so that was the best time as any. And then also I was ready for a pivot. So traditional marketing communications, I have a master's in integrated marketing communication. So as much as I've been in PR, I've always been one who's been open and pushing of that more integrated approach. And I actually started to work with mergers and acquisitions.
Wow.
And more of the strategy and the communication behind that, and really helping, conscious cultures kind of navigate that big change of, we know whose name is on the door because it's usually whoever's writing the check for the most part. But I started to see a lot of brands look at M&A as a growth strategy, but they couldn't figure out the culture and the narratives that came as a result of that. And in most cases needed that insight even before they closed those deals. And so unlike the average, Marcom's contract, when you think of shops and you think of that traditional way where there's the RFP, everybody's kind of going for it, this has really been a sweet spot for us. And I'm having a lot of fun. So in terms of clients, not necessarily household brands that, a lot of people would know about, but mid-sized companies between like your $5 and $50 million range that are trying to grow in their categories. We have some retail. We are doing some things that are right now interesting in the restaurant industry. I'll call you first when we can talk about that. But also manufacturing, technology, and all those categories that.
Are these in the mainly in the Chicago area, or are you all over?
All over. Yeah, and even when I was growing up kind of in agency life, the agencies were based in Chicago, but I've always either worked on national business or global business.
Sure. When you were at Flowers and Golin, was that more consumer-related work in general?
It was a combination. I would say it leaned toward consumer, so maybe like a 70-30 split, but I've also just been really passionate about community relations. So as much as, it's been national and global, bringing it back to the people that matter, folks on the ground. So community relations, stakeholder engagement. When I worked on the McDonald's brand for Golin, we actually put together at that time what was McDonald's first strategic stakeholder engagement platform. People don't even really use the term anymore. Like it's all melted over into influencer, which I hope that's not one of the topics on the list because influencers mean so many different things. But yeah, so a lot of stakeholder engagement work and community relations.
Good, sounds great. Tell us a bit about the PR scene in Chicago. You've got agencies like Golin, obviously Edelman, it's his home city. Yep. We've had Pete Marino on the show from Miller Coors.
He's a good friend of mine.
John Harris is going to be a guest.
He was my first client.
Was he?
He was. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yep.
Really interesting that he got promoted to a sort of C-suite level.
Absolutely.
There. And lots of other companies there. John Harris at Conagra.
Yep.
You've got United Airlines, as we all know about that. So it's a very vibrant business scene and a vibrant communication scene, isn't it?
Yes. And so I teach for Roosevelt University. And one of the things that I say to students all the time is, and this is no shade to New Yorkers, but if you're going to pick a market where you're really trying to grow your career, specifically, not even marketing communications, from a public relations standpoint, Chicago is an incredible market. Every transnational, global, local firm, if you want to specialize, if you want to do fashion, sports, if you want to do, government, it's all there. Whether it's political, whether it's, social, whatever it is, it's like this sweet spot in the middle of the country where you can really get your chops, from boutique shops to, your Edelmans of the world. And then the corporate side, so the growth and the transition, Heinz, Kraft, United, McDonald's is leaving Oak Brook after a zillion years and coming into the West Loop. So that's a big deal. So.
Yeah, that is a big deal.
Yeah,
it's a great market, and maybe Chicagoans baseball fans can give some hope to Mets fans like Frank, because they finally won the series, didn't they?
Yeah. And we're going to have to wait at least another year, probably another 30. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, let's not wade into Frank's private health too soon. But so what would your sell be for, basing yourself in Chicago as a PR pro? Because a lot of people think that you probably do have to go to New York, don't they, to really get on? But that's not the case at all. What would you say to a young PR professional?
So Frank and I were talking before we went live, and one of the things about it is there are so many different opportunities for networking and for building those relationships. I had some folks from Olsen come and speak to a class of mine last week. And
Olsen's another local agency, isn't it? That's where Pete Marino used to be.
Yeah. And the folks from Olsen came in and they spoke to the class. And one of the things that one of the young professionals was saying to the group is that you can do something as simple as finding someone on LinkedIn who's at an agency doing work that you would want to do. and send them a message and just say, can we go out for coffee? Like, can we meet? And 9 times out of 10, they'll say yes. Relationships are born that way. And it's not just about what you're doing academically, but have some hustle, about yourself. Like, if you want to do it, you don't have to have a formal internship or a formal, this is open, this is blue sky, blue ocean for creativity, and fledgling PR professionals can get really creative about getting that experience and how they're able to market themselves and get in front of the right people.
It's a good point, that.
And of course, internships.
Yeah, I mean, in New York, you'd probably just get tumbleweed blowing through if you sent someone a message, wouldn't you? So that's a good point. And finally, Chicago is getting a bit of a bad rap at the moment, isn't it? Sort of nationally.
Which way? Is it the crime of the
but actually, every time I've been there, I've been struck by what a vibrant, fantastic city it is. So, give us the sort of hard sell for Chicago.
It is a world-class city, and there's so much between art and theater and culture and neighborhoods, and just the, again, another conversation we were having offline. Chicago is what you would get from the big city of New York, but it has this southern Midwest charm and hospitality that I think you genuinely get a sense of warmth and inclusion. And so I am a Chi-Town girl, from the beginning, and so I can't help but advocate for a beautiful city
I agree.
In that way. I
agree. What do you think Chicago needs to do from a branding point of view or communications point of view to sort of, I think most people know that, don't they? But, obviously there is negative publicity about it. What do you think they need to do on that front?
I think, the more Chicagoans continue to represent the diversity and the richness that Chicago is, I think it'll be fine. It's one of those things where it's kind of cyclical, right? So there are national trends, there's a wave, and, and there are some realistic hard facts that support some of that, but I think it's a lean into what we're just saying is a media focus right now. And I don't know that there are
social problems in all big cities, aren't there? I mean, that's just a fact of life. Yeah, no, I agree with you. Amen to that. So let's get into our topics.
All right.
Artificial intelligence. Frank, are we about to be taken over by robots? And because we've done a special cover bunch of features in October about AI, and looking at 1, what every PR pro needs to know, 2, can AI be creative, and 3, what's its impact on journalism, because actually some outlets are already using robots to write templated stories.
Right, and that was my favorite part of the feature, and it's a terrific feature if you haven't read it already. It's but the part about AI in journalism I find really interesting, and I think that if you were almost to look at it through sports reporting, I mean, you could get a basic rundown of what happens at a game through AI very, very easily. What you can't get is the real color of what happened and the post-game stuff and the personalities and things like that. But that's right now. I think proponents of AI might say that you could at some point. I think creativity is very similar in some ways, and that it's working towards that, isn't it?
Yeah, I think sports and financial stories are they're being written by robots. There are places like Reuters and AP. Google's doing this thing in the UK, this experiment with regional newspapers to try and the idea is that allows journalists to spend more time digging and getting good stories.
Right.
Whether that is actually going to work out in practice or whether they're actually just going to have even fewer journalists, I don't know. But it's certainly it's coming in, it's there already, and it's changing journalism. On your creativity point, they had that interesting experiment in Japan, didn't they, where they gave the same brief to a creative team and to a computer and asked them to come up with solutions. I think it was 60-40, chose the human response. That's already pretty close, isn't it, Rashada?
But of course you could be cynical and wonder if the humans were doing their best work on it too.
You can always be cynical, Frank.
I try not to be.
That's the news editor's role.
Yeah. There's another part of this too that I think is going to be interesting for PR professionals, and that's the measurement piece. Mm-hmm. So, we talk about being able to validate and measure PR, and I think AI is going to start to play a really critical role in that as we move down the line going forward.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that just the pure computer power that's being thrown at stuff and that can crunch data, analytics, etc., to both inform strategy and creativity, but also to measure afterwards. This stuff is coming. Although I must admit, when you look around and dig beneath the surface, it's difficult to find real case studies yet of it actually being used, in PR. There's a lot of talk about it, there's a lot of chat about it, but it's still, I think it's still relatively early stages in terms of real case studies, or people don't want to talk about them because they think they've got the special sauce. I'm not sure which one it is. But do check those features out. They're really, really interesting, and a lot of work went into those. Let us know what you think. Frank, there's always a bunch of people moves, but some particularly noteworthy ones this week, including Airbnb's CMO.
Yeah, I have to say this is one that surprised me. This is somebody who seemed really tethered to the brand he was working for, but Airbnb CMO Jonathan Mildenhall stepping down. He's going to launch his own consulting firm called 21st Century Brand. Really interesting, story to watch. I think he's been whether it's been his outspokenness about lack of diversity at Cannes and other issues, definitely an outspoken guy. So somebody to watch as he goes into the agency world, see if he remains as high profile as he was before.
Yeah, he's always adopted a high profile. I know G's another Englishman. I know him from the UK. He did a conference for us when I was editing Media Week over there. Fantastic presenter, by the way. But he's been very vocal about things like diversity in marketing and the fact that we really haven't made that many strides at Cannes this year. He was big. There was a big platform on that. I remember when he went to Airbnb. Was it Pepsi or was it Coke that he?
Coke.
It was Coke, wasn't it? Yeah, you don't want to get those two wrong. And he immediately dove into a bit of a controversy, didn't he? With that, remember the new logo for Airbnb was a little bit of an interesting.
It looked like something else.
Yes, it did. Is Jonathan someone you know, Rashada?
No, but I followed his career, and I'm actually excited about this. I mean, again, as someone who has an entrepreneurial spirit, and as I was reading about it, he's 50. He's talking about the contributions that he wants to make to the marketing industry as a whole. So I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, he's a very inspiring guy, definitely. Yeah, I think he'll have plenty of suitors for his work. But interesting to see, because that was a high-profile role, CMO at a company like Airbnb. So. Interesting move. Were there any others noteworthy moves this week?
Nancy Elder has a new job. She left.
She flew the coop.
You could say that.
Did you see what I did there?
Yes.
Because she worked at
JetBlue,
which is an airline, and airplanes fly.
Yeah, I know.
See what they did there, Frank? Yeah. Anyway, where's she gone?
She's the new Chief Communications Officer at Mattel in El Segundo, California. So an interesting people move there.
Not a role to toy with. I'm sorry. I'm going on vacation. I don't care anymore.
You might be on vacation.
Yeah, maybe I should go after this show. Anything else, Frank? Or those were the two main ones? Yeah, probably a good thing actually. Yeah. Tell us about this Army contract. We've mentioned this a couple of times on the podcast.
Yes.
It looked like McCann was completely out of the game, but they appealed. And they've been successful.
So rare step for the GAO here, for them to actually blame the Army for McCann.
The GAO being
the Government Accountability Office.
Thank you.
For them actually blaming the Army for McCann's dismissal from this. And essentially what they said was that McCann's proposal, which of course is team up with Weber Shandwick on this.
It's a big IPG.
There was a lot of forgetting of dotting the I's and crossing the T's, so to speak. Where using a PDF instead of an Excel document, or not attaching the right stuff, or very detailed things. So exactly, and so what the Army did not do was essentially hear them out and go through the full presentation and weigh everything, instead of relying on those small details. And essentially the GAO said they have to go and reconsider the proposal over again, and they have to reimburse their legal fees for, or they should reimburse their legal fees for appealing this. So interesting.
Very interesting.
It is interesting. I mean, they'd already got a stay of a year, hadn't they? I think anyway, because of the appeal, and now
a lucrative one, we should say. They're going to make.
Yeah, Rashada, these are big accounts, aren't they? I know in Minneapolis, I think Weber's office there is something like 150 strong, and a lot of those people work on the Army account. So, are those big contracts to go after for PR pros, or are they really confined to the bigger agencies?
Well, I think there's opportunity across the board. I mean, I've seen in my former life, I've seen that RFP or iterations of it. There's usually a multicultural component, a social media component, various niche components that fall in partnership with whatever the AOR or agency of record is. So yeah, I think it's certainly viable, and for even for the big agencies, it's a great staple or mainstay kind of pillar tenet that they can kind of build around. And to your point, with that much head count against, you know, one client, it certainly has implications for their bottom line. So I can see why they're taking it to
this one is a $4 billion value
We'll
over
see.
10
There you
years.
Yeah, got a lot of paid media in that,
Yeah.
of course, but yeah, definitely big contracts. Actually, I remember the last time it was reviewed, I think Golin actually did, even though they're in the same group as Weber, I think Draft FCB and Golin put an alternative pitch together, because I think there was some concern there that, you know, the McCann-Weber pitch wasn't going to work. So, but they did eventually win it. So they're hanging in there. They're hanging in there, and yeah. So we'll see how that one plays out. No doubt I'll come back to that on the podcast. Cam Newton got himself in a bit of hot water, didn't he, Frank, with not the best response to a question from a female journalist.
You know, Cam had his first really good game of the season on Sunday, and then he did a press conference yesterday in which he kind of took a swipe at a
Just
female
for those
journalist, right?
who aren't big NFL fans,
Right,
Cam Newton would be...
He is the outspoken quarterback for the Carolina Panthers.
Okay.
And he was, until today anyway, an endorser of Oikos yogurt made by Dannon. So they let him go after he made this comment about a female reporter at a press conference on Wednesday, and essentially said, "It's funny to hear a female talking about routes." She asked him a question about one of the wide receivers. Those are the guys that catch the ball down the field.
Football's that game you play with your hands.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
Just
anyway.
checking. Yeah.
Apart
Apart from that guy, the Philadelphia guy who hit that 61-yard field goal to win the game.
That was impressive.
Against the Giants.
I picked him up on 2 fantasy teams.
Yeah, you see, I have some knowledge of your game.
Anyway, Cam Newton, no longer with Dannon, was just cut today, and we are reaching out to his other backers to see if anybody else has done the same thing.
Yeah, Rashada, in business, do you still come across these sort of Luddite attitudes to women? You know, it seems crazy that people are making comments like that still in this day and age.
It does, and I haven't followed the whole story. I kind of saw it as a headline. In general, I really like Cam, you know, as a player. I think for me, if I come across those things, I ignore them because they have a lot of weight when you give them a lot of weight. And so that's my short answer, you know, to that question. He strikes me, though, as one of those individuals that it is very matter of fact, and he's kind of shooting from this, you know,
from the hip, yeah.
From the hip, which happens to me to be very authentic to his brand, and it just unfortunately doesn't always align. That kind of, you know, it doesn't always align with sponsorship.
Yeah, I like Newton a lot, and he's an interesting player to watch play because he's such a big guy, and he can
Super
get out
lively.
and run with the ball so well. And
He took him to the Super Bowl, didn't he?
he did,
Yeah.
which didn't turn out well, but
No.
he did. But he should be savvier than this in
He
some
should.
ways.
He should.
and
Every
he's-
athlete should.
Well,
know.
but he's very much a millennial athlete in a lot of ways, and in the way he carries himself, and I mean that in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
And he, so yeah, he should just be savvier than this, really.
And this is where good teams, and when I say teams, not his sports team, but this
Right.
is where good teams and resources come into play. Because to your point, when you reach a certain level, it's one thing to this is how this is how you roll, being authentic. It's also another thing to understand the field that you're playing on and
Right.
the expectations and the accountability that come
Yeah.
along with that.
Separate to this issue, Rashada, talking NFL, would you let a child of yours play football? Because a lot of parents are not letting their kids go in because of worries about concussion and the dangers of the sport. And in fact, some schools, I think, have even dropped the sport. What's your sort of take on that as a parent?
So, as a parent, I feel like I am a supporter of the things that my kids want to try that give them the courage and the creativity and the energy to kind of build confidence. I wouldn't be just, rah-rah about football per se because of the dangers of it, but I would be open. Like if one of my kids wanted to play football, one is a girl, one is a boy, by the way. If one of my kids wanted to play football, I would, support it to the extent of seeing how they like it, because a lot of the times they want to do stuff and they try it and they kind of self-dismiss. and then just, kind of ride their wave and see.
Or
how it
once
goes.
they learn that there's a lot of running involved.
Exactly. I'm tired. I don't want to play football.
No, it's a difficult topic, isn't it? I used to do boxing when I was a kid, and well, look how I turned out. But anyway, that's probably not an advert for it. But we saw with the Aaron Hernandez thing, didn't we,
Yeah.
Frank? That there are issues around
Right.
brain damage with the sport. There's no way of
And
around
every
it.
study that comes out about it is really bad for the game in a lot of ways, because it shows that there are so many former professional players who come down with very serious brain issues later in life, and sometimes not even that far after their career is over. So they're going to have to figure out a way, whether it's through the helmets or not,
Right.
to make it safer.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues around NFL. Rashada, do you have a view on the whole taking a knee thing and the way that's played out over the last couple of weeks? It was obviously a big issue the Sunday before last, and everyone it's an emotive issue, isn't it?
It
The
is.
flag is an
It
emotive
is.
issue for Americans especially.
And it's interesting. So I mentioned I teach crisis comm and I teach fundamentals of public relations. So this has come up in both classes. And the approach that we've taken is really following the message, right? So it has become about the flag, but it really didn't start
Right.
as a matter that was about the flag. And I think in so many cases what we're seeing is rebellion against what people feel is, something that's polarizing. And I almost feel like folks are taking a side for the sake of taking a side. And the issue that started it started with Colin Kaepernick, and
Police
the issues that
brutality
it
and
started
issues
with
around
are
that,
not
right?
really the issues that
Yeah.
we are right now.
It clearly became another thing.
It
2
became
weeks
another thing.
ago, and that I think a lot of players were just offended by the president's comments about the way football is played.
And it
now,
became
or
a back and
something
forth
like that,
between them and him, and it was really about something else.
And that's the way things play out on social media these days, isn't it? You can't have it doesn't seem as though you can have a productive debate about anything.
No.
You've got to have either one side of
For me to win, you got to lose.
Yeah, there's no sort of agree to
Right.
disagree, and
Right.
let's have an intelligent debate about it. It's basically you're wrong, I'm right, and let's just abuse
Right.
each other. And that's disappointing in a way, but it seems to be the way a lot of public dialogue happens now. And for communicators, you've got to be aware of that and work in that context.
And here's an interesting fun fact. I'm young, and when I started in PR, there was no social media. And so I when you talk about artificial intelligence, I say this to students all the time. It's like, it has completely shifted and changed the game of a whole culture, of a whole industry, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. And you got to know really what battles you're fighting when you partake in the back and forth from a social media standpoint.
Yeah, for sure. Totally agree. So that takes us into our last topic, which is about diversity in
Yes.
marketing and communications, because still a big issue. Advertising Week last week, HP had an interesting session where some clients are actually insisting that their agencies hit targets for diversity, whether it's gender, whether it's ethnicity. And it seemed HP did a sort of report on how their agencies were doing, and other clients like General Mills and Verizon, and I think Lenovo are doing this as well. And it seemed like they're doing pretty well on gender, but there's still a long way to go on ethnicity. And Rashada, it seems like we've been having this conversation
We
for
have.
30, 40 years.
Maybe 20.
And
with me.
yeah, but in the industry,
Right,
and
yes.
and nothing seems to change, and it's
Yeah.
kind of depressing, isn't it? Even when a client says we ain't going to use you
Right.
unless you get your acts together, and there's still sort of mealy mouth. Well, we're doing our best and all. So, what's your take on it?
So two things, and we mentioned, me being from Chicago and that sort of thing, and I've had this conversation with several agencies that I have great relationships with. At the end of the day, being in a world-class city, in a diverse city like Chicago is, I personally call a flag on a play when your teams cannot reflect even the culture of the cities that you're living in and you're representing, let alone the client base that you're looking at. So if you take the average consumer brand and you look at the diverse complexity of what that brand looks like, I feel like to bring our best creative selves to the table, that you have to have diversity of thought, diversity of experience, diversity of race, diversity of gender. You just have to. That's that's a flag
it
that I've been waving.
Makes good business sense.
For many,
now, how often
years.
do you run into that in 2017? I mean, is it still
where that's not the case?
Yeah.
I honestly feel like and I'm going to generalize because I'm comfortable doing this. I feel like the industry in general is not much farther along than it was when I started, in terms of that. I think you have boutique shops that maybe focus on multicultural and things of that nature, and I think a lot of folks feel like, oh, well, if you are, of a diverse background, like if you're Black, you'll just work for a Black agency, or if you're this, and that's not
Sure.
the case, obviously.
That's
and
not
so
the way
it
forward,
just,
is it?
I don't think that the needle has moved very far on this, and I think some of it has to do with, a lot of the times agencies are looking for the thought leadership, people who are already at a certain level who can come in and help lead practice groups, or who can bring, a level of strategy. But if that's been the approach, and we're, decades into this, at some point you might want to place your bets on young talent. And the more you really invest in that young talent, I think you will see the maturation of diverse talent across the industry that'll be growing up and getting that experience and that sort of thing. But it's the topic that keeps on.
Yeah, it keeps coming around. It's a bit depressing that we're not moving forward more. It's something we are pushing as much as we can on at PR Week, through our Diversity Distinction in PR Awards and other initiatives. But we do want to have a time when we don't have to do those awards. That's the aspiration. I like what you said there. There's two things. One, consumers are diverse, so you're going to sell more goods if you've got diverse offerings. And two, there's so much great talent, diverse young talent, that you're missing out on some fantastic, skills and perspectives. So, but I think people don't see the role models, do they, at senior levels to aspire to. So there's plenty of diversity at junior levels, but then people get disillusioned and kind of move away and go and do their own thing or go and do something else. So, by the way, I don't think PR is the worst industry in the world on it either. But we need to be doing better, and across the board in marketing and communication. So yeah, amen to that. So listen, thanks, Rashada. It's been great to chat and great to have you here. Rashada's a columnist of ours, so you can catch up on her thoughts every month, roughly once a month. Yep. And thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Couple of housekeeping announcements before we go. We've got our big conference next week, October the 12th in New York City. Fantastic lineup, so do snag a last minute ticket for that if you're in New York City. PR Week Awards, if you haven't got your entries in yet, you need to get them done quickly. October 10th, Tuesday, is the final deadline for that, so please work hard and get those in. We have our Brand Film Festival launched 2 weeks' time on October the 18th in New York City again. We're teaming up with NAB, the National Association of Broadcasters. We've got an event at their big conference at the Javits Center, and then we have a VIP reception in the evening. So if you want to come to that, ping us and we'll see if we can get you on the list. And finally, we've got our Hall of Fame on December the 4th. Brilliant lineup of honorees this year, including Xenia Muka from Disney, Howard Rubenstein, we've got Muriel Fox, we've got Kim Hunter, and Bill Heyman. So a really fantastic lineup, and really looking forward to that evening. That's also a night when we'll kick off our 20th anniversary year, which is 2018. And we are also celebrating that with the PR Council and Kim Hunter's LeGrant Foundation, which is actually does fantastic work in encouraging diverse talent. And Kim, we're definitely honouring Kim because of all the great work he's done there. So but that's all we've got time for, I'm afraid. We'll see you next time on the PR Week.
All good?